Countries bordering on Russia are looking nervously at their larger neighbour following its annexation of Crimea. In the Baltic states, all now members of NATO, that's meant stepping up air patrols along their borders, with America sending extra warplanes to bolster their defences. Our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale has been to Lithuania to watch NATO's forces on exercise.
Every moment of every day, NATO warplanes are on alert. This is an exercise, but here in Lithuania, it really matters. The Baltic states are increasingly nervous about the behaviour of their big neighbour Russia.
I can say Cold War because it's the very hot war. The Russians, they occupy the part of Ukraine and they concentrate the forces, and I think we should be ready to defend our states if this aggression will continue.
These F-15s can be scrambled within minutes, and it's not just about reassuring the Baltic states. It's also about sending a clear message to Russia too.
The Baltics don't have much of an air force, so they rely on NATO partners to take turns patrolling their skies. Normally, there are just 4 warplanes, but this month the Americans have sent 10. And there are offers of more planes too.
NATO has a great responsibility across its entire spectrum of its airspace, and maintaining sovereign airspace is very important to any nation. And when you're a part of the strongest alliance in the history of the world, our sovereign airspace, that's where it all begins, is air superiority.
Have you got the chance to see any Russian planes up close?
I have the same answer. I can't comment on the operational specifics of the mission.
But at one of NATO's command centres, they have seen increasing Russian military activity. At this base, they can track every aircraft from the Alps to northern Norway. And practically every week, they're spotting Russian warplanes that appear without warning.
We've seen a slow increase over the years, consistent with Russian ambition, if you like. Their air forces now receive more money. We know that, everybody knows that, and so we see more activity. Yeah.
Is that worrying?
I would say it's not worrying, but we need to be sure we're aware of it. Yeah.
This is still a modest military response, and NATO officials are playing down talk of a new Cold War. But out on the Eastern Front, the alliance's smaller members are looking for assurances and a stronger show of force. Jonathan Beale, BBC News, Lithuania.
The Malaysian authorities say they've ruled out any passenger involvement in the disappearance of the airliner, which vanished more than 3 weeks ago. Police are now focusing on the crew after concluding that the flight path was probably altered by someone on board. A Royal Navy submarine has now arrived in the southern Indian Ocean to join the search operation. The medical charity Médecins Sans Frontières has called the current outbreak of the deadly Ebola virus in West Africa an unprecedented epidemic. So far, more than 80 people have died in Guinea and 4 in Liberia. Our World Affairs correspondent Mike Wooldridge has the latest.
Ebola, now in West Africa for the first time, is one of the world's deadliest diseases. It can kill up to 90% of those who become infected, and the threat to health workers dealing with patients means they must wear fully protective clothing. The World Health Organization is shipping extra supplies to Guinea and sending in more personnel. Top priorities are to stop the disease spreading further and chase contacts of those already infected.
Ebola outbreaks are always of very high concern. Ebola outbreaks can never be considered under control until 42 days have passed since the last case.
This outbreak of Ebola at Kikwit in the Democratic Republic of Congo in the mid-1990s killed more than 200 people before it was over. It was 20 years earlier that the disease first appeared in the same country, with a simultaneous outbreak in Sudan. The virus is transmitted through close contact with blood or other bodily fluids, and the disease can be caught from both humans and animals, such as the fruit bat. The poorer the country affected, the greater the challenges. But as the battle to contain this Ebola outbreak intensifies, Guinea's president has called on his people not to panic. Mike Wooldridge, BBC News.
Wales could become the first part of the UK to ban the use of electronic cigarettes in public places. Ministers say they're responding to concern that the devices which can contain nicotine make smoking appear normal and undermine the smoking ban. Here's our Wales correspondent, Hal Griffith.
A harmless puff in public or a gateway to greater harm. In pubs and cafes once filled with clouds of smoke, the vapour of an e-cigarette is now the new norm. For these users, the idea of a government ban is unthinkable.
Well, it's got nothing to do with them, is it? If you want to smoke, you smoke.
I think I would still smoke. I won't go back on the cigarettes. I would still stick to the vapour.
The potential risks of using vaporisers like these are still being investigated, but the Welsh Government says it's certain they cause harm.
We are fearful that e-cigarettes are a gateway to real cigarettes. That once people get used to using those, and they are nicotine products which are highly addictive, then that will make it easier for them to move into real cigarettes.
The growth in the e-cigarette industry has been enormous in the last few years, with shops like this one popping up on every high street, serving an estimated 1.3 million users across the UK. Retailers argue many of those are people trying to improve their health by swapping smoke for vapour.
I would say 95% of people use it as a gateway to exit smoking regular cigarettes, and I would have to say that we don't get any people coming in saying I'm thinking of taking up the habit of vaping.
A ban on sales to under 18-year-olds is likely to come in across the UK. But by pushing even further, the Welsh Government is sending out a signal that it knows what's best for public health. Hywel Griffith, BBC News, Cardiff.
6 people have died in bomb blasts across Afghanistan in the run-up to this weekend's presidential election. Hamid Karzai stands down after 10 years in the post, and for the first time, there's a real possibility that a woman could become the country's vice president, a major change in a country with an international reputation for its lack of women's rights. Our Afghanistan correspondent, David Loyne, reports from Kabul.
Handing over a box of toys, Habiba Sarabi is campaigning to become the most powerful woman in Afghanistan as vice presidential candidate in one of the 3 teams that stand a chance of winning. This politician, trained as a doctor, has been seeing for herself the plight of malnourished children in hospital. She knows that Afghan women have a long way to go.
We have to work very hard for the other women who are at the village level, convince them that they are human beings like others, and they have to promote themselves.
Dr. Sarabi became prominent as the reformist governor of Bamiyan in the centre of the country. She's from the Hazara community, where women have relatively more equality than in other places. Another woman candidate, Safia Siddiqui, is a Pashtun, the same as the Taliban, and has had a harder struggle. She's used to being in meetings where she's the only woman, but has not heard criticisms when she's been campaigning this time.
Even from the Taliban side, I haven't heard that. And it does mean the Afghan people, they're accepting the women's presence even in a high level. This is one part of the issue. But for the other side, if the women cannot come for the vote, then there is no need for a woman to be in the high-level governmental office.
Intimidation and the threat of violence could prevent women voting, even if there are now women to vote for. On a Kabul street on a normal, busy morning, there are hardly any women among the people bustling to and fro. Life for too many women remains very pinched. They remain property in the view of many Afghan men. 13 years after the fall of the Taliban, so many promises were made, but so little has changed for women's rights in Afghanistan. And these few women who are aiming for the top could begin to make a change for the better. David Loyne, BBC News, Kabul.
Police in Italy say they've recovered two French masterpieces stolen in London more than 40 years ago. The works by Paul Gauguin and Pierre Bonnard were taken from a house in Regent's Park in 1971. Police in Italy showed off the artworks at a press conference this morning and revealed they'd been found in the home of a pensioner in Sicily. Sarah Campbell has the story.
Thought to have been lost 4 decades after they disappeared, two masterpieces are now back on display. This still life by Paul Gauguin is worth an estimated £8.5 million. This, along with Pierre Bonnard's Woman with Two Armchairs, was stolen from a private address in London in 1971. According to Italian police, they were left on a train at one point and bought for a fraction of their real value by an Italian worker. It was his son who spotted they might be genuine artworks and alerted the police. The potential financial rewards from a successful heist can be staggering. In 2008, in Switzerland, pieces by Monet, Van Gogh, Cézanne and Degas, with a total value exceeding £80 million, were taken in a robbery lasting minutes. All were eventually found, as was Edvard Munch's The Scream, one of the most famous thefts in recent years. It had suffered damage, but was still able to be put on display. As countless thefts have shown, as long as artworks retain their multi-million-pound price tags, they'll be targeted by criminal gangs who see their value in purely financial terms. Sarah Campbell, BBC News.
Right, time now for a
Hello, first this lunchtime. More on that news that our region will be hardest hit by record levels of air pollution within the next few hours. Now you can see from these pictures at Ipswich docks early this morning how bad the visibility was, and it's set to worsen. Government experts rank pollution from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. Parts of East Anglia and the East Midlands are predicted to reach the highest level. Now, it's all been caused by a combination of dust blown over from the Sahara, and you can see it heading north towards continental Europe. Now, take a closer look at the UK, and you can see how that, combined with exhaust emissions, is moving west. That purple shaded area in the east of England is where the pollution is at its highest.
Now the winds have turned more southeasterly. We brought in the pollution from the nearby continent. That, coupled with our own pollution that we're developing here in East Anglia, has caused the issues with the air quality over the last few days.
In a sense, a perfect storm.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. With the wind so light, there's nothing to disperse the air pollution, so it will continue to sit there really until either the winds pick up or we introduce some fresher air off the Atlantic.
Well, as you might expect, GPs are seeing an increase in pollution-related admissions, and they have this advice.
Those people who know that they have a respiratory problem, they are the people who have asthma, chronic obstructive airways disease, and those people who have things like hay fever, seasonal hay fever, I would suggest that they very much need to start taking their medications now, if they haven't done so, and if they have done so, make sure that they take them religiously as they have been prescribed.
Well, apart from the health issues, businesses too have been affected. For this car dealership, it's the busiest time of year. And over the last 2 days, dust from the Sahara has settled over all of their cars on the forecourt.
Our head valeter pulled off one of the covers from the car. We protect them from any other elements. And within minutes of taking it off, there was a layer of dust, which is just unprecedented. We really have never seen anything like that before. So we're just having to re-clean, and literally minutes before the cars go out.
And we'll have more on that on Look East tonight. On to other news now, and police in Essex have begun searching a river, looking for the weapon used to kill a father of 5 at the weekend. James Atfield, who was brain damaged after a car crash 4 years ago, was stabbed more than 100 times. Our chief reporter Kim Riley sent this from the scene in Colchester.
A large area of parkland around the river is still sealed off this lunchtime as the hunt continues for the vital clue, the murder weapon. There's a specialist team in the shallowish water of the river behind me, wading along very slowly, looking possibly for a knife. A tent still covers the spot where James Atfield lay dying early on Saturday morning. We've seen a number of officers in white forensic suits operating around it. Police were taken aback by the ferocity of the attack on 33-year-old Mr. Atfield, a father of 5, described as vulnerable after suffering head injuries in a car crash 4 years ago. He had more than 100 knife wounds to his body. No motive has been established for this murder, and as yet, indeed, police don't know whether they're looking for a single killer or killers. An inquest was opened and adjourned this morning, the cause of death given as multiple stab wounds. In the next half hour, Mr. Atfield's mother, Julie, will join the police at a press conference in Chelmsford, appealing for information that could bring those responsible to justice. Kim Riley, BBC Look East, Colchester.
Players from Norwich City Football Club are going to refund fans who travelled to Swansea for the game last Saturday. The Canaries lost 3-0 and the players have decided they want to do something to make up for their poor performance. Well, Radio Norfolk's Chris Gorham is here now. Chris, you were at the match on Saturday. Was it really that bad?
It was a bad performance, a 3-0 defeat to a team that was actually below Norwich City in the division before the game kicked off, made it really disappointing. I think what heightened it was the fact that the fans had travelled so far. Norwich to Swansea is a 600-mile round trip. It's about 12 hours in the car, all in all, and it's Norwich's 7th successive away defeat. Now, Norwich fans have always travelled in good numbers, and I think there's a growing feeling that they really have been shortchanged on the road this season. 7 away defeats in a row is a really poor return, considering that the support they get and the time and money that the fans invest following them away from home.
I mean, is this unprecedented? How unusual is this?
It really is unusual. I've certainly not heard of a Norwich City team doing this before, and I think football fans are not silly. It's not like buying tickets for a film or for a play. If you go and spend money to watch your team play, you know there's a chance they're going to lose the game, that they may not turn up. The end hasn't been decided, after all, like it has at the theatre or at the cinema. So you know that when you buy a ticket. I think the fact that this apparently has come from the players themselves. The players themselves feel they have let the supporters down. And I think that's what makes it so unusual, because there were 880-odd supporters made this trip. They all paid to get in, upwards of £20, £30. So it is actually quite a big outlay that the players have decided to put their hands in their pockets for. Most of the fans I've spoken to are quite pleased that they see it as a really good gesture from the club and from the players being made for all the right reasons. But they've all said they would have preferred the 3 points rather than their money back, though.
And just very briefly, it looks like the players will have to stump up, not the club.
It's coming directly from the players' pockets, as far as we understand, yeah.
OK, Chris, thanks very much indeed. An inquest has heard that the death of a woman who was killed when her car plunged into water at North Bank near Peterborough was an accident. It's believed that 19-year-old Hannah Yates lost control of the vehicle as she was driving last November. 8 other people have been injured on the same stretch of road. Safety barriers have now been installed. Bedfordshire's Police and Crime Commissioner has been interviewed under caution by the Independent Police Complaints Commission. Earlier this year, Ollie Martins admitted giving away confidential information about the death in custody of Leon Briggs from Luton. The IPCC is carrying out a separate investigation into Bedfordshire Police's involving 5 police officers and 2 civilian staff. Plans to manage England's coastline sustainably are being published today. They cover the eastern inshore and offshore areas. The east of England was chosen because of its range of marine activities, including wind farms. There'll be 11 plans covering all English waters by 2021. Now, our region does more trade with Europe than anywhere else. And yet, if the polls are to be believed, we are more Eurosceptic than anywhere else in the country. With the television debate between the Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg and the leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage, just a few hours away, our political correspondent Andrew Sinclair asks, what has Europe done for us?
This is the Titchwell Nature Reserve in North Norfolk. They recently spent £1.2 million here on a new hide and raising the wall to protect the freshwater marshes from the sea. 2/3 of the money came from Europe. For the RSPB, being part of the EU is very useful.
There's 2 main benefits for the organisation. Clearly, one is the funding that we get from Europe, but also working with our European partners on conservation protection and wildlife protection, both in the UK and throughout Europe.
The new Ipswich freight line, which opened this week, was part funded by the EU. In the last 7 years, more than £600 million has been given to universities and companies in the region for research and development. Subsidies to farmers, improvements to Southwold Harbour, just a handful of things funded by Europe, while Business points out that 55% of our trade is with the EU. To most people here at the European Parliament, it makes complete sense for us to be part of Europe.
It benefits each family in the east of England by £3,000 a year. That's the value of the extra trade that we bring. Not Labour saying that, not even a politician saying it. That's what British Business, the CBI, says.
But critics point out we pay far more to here in tax than we ever get back. They believe the European Commission and other institutions like the Court of Human Rights have too much of a say in our lives. The political commentator Simon Heffer, who lives in Essex, says it's all gone too far.
I drive around bits of Britain and see signs up saying paid for by the European Community. Well, we could have paid for it ourselves. I'd rather have that money spent here, and I'd rather the people that I elect to govern me decided how to spend it.
And even here in Brussels, there are people who agree with him.
I think we could do a lot better outside the EU with a suitable trade agreement.
But wouldn't we lose out?
No, I don't think we would. We'd have full access to the EU single market. Remember, we import far more cars or wine or goods from the EU than we actually export to it.
What we've got here is yet another example of the EU trying to find a role.
Yesterday, another Conservative, Geoffrey Van Orden, was questioning why the EU is helping to tackle piracy off the African coast. There is another view here which says that Europe would be much better for us if it did fewer things and spent less money. Not surprisingly, most people here want us to stay in Europe, but opponents believe the argument is going their way.
Well, clearly that